illegal border crossings into the United States from Canada have skyrocketed over the past few years, and in particular, this year. Coincidentally, at the same time, Canada's own population has skyrocketed with millions of new non-permanent residents.
Normally peaceful and picturesque Niagara River, tonight running at the center of the northern border's emerging migrant crisis.
The number of people crossing from Canada into New England is rising rapidly.
Tonight, America's newest border crisis, this one up north.
It's definitely a huge issue.
Law enforcement officials in the North Country are sounding the alarm as recent data shows an unprecedented rise in the number of illegal crossings on the northern border.
And these people aren't just wandering migrants looking for the American dream. It turns out that last year, over 480 migrants who entered the United States from Canada were on the U.S. terror watch list.
Last fiscal year, Border Patrol apprehended 564 people on the terror watch list. Of them, 484 were encountered on the northern border.
But who exactly are these illegal border jumpers and where do they come from? Well, according to new data from the U.S. Customs and Border Patrol, in June alone, over 5,000 Indian migrants attempted to enter the United States illegally from Canada, a new record. In just March of this past year, over 1,000 migrants were apprehended at the Vermont border crossing with Quebec. The majority of them, over 400, were from India. But in that 1,000 group, over 40 different countries were represented. So people from all over the world are seeing this loophole here, and they're looking to exploit it. Well, in fact, to no one's surprise, the situation doesn't stop there. Now even the United Kingdom is voicing its concerns to Ottawa after a surge of Indians holding Canadian visas while traveling through the UK have abandoned their trips to Canada and immediately claimed asylum in the UK. Over 1,000 people have done this, by the way, prompting the UK and the United States to call on Ottawa to strengthen visa measures.
The number of Indian nationals seeking asylum in the UK during transit to Canada has spiked alarmingly in recent years. In 2022, there was a 136% increase in the number of Indians seeking asylum at port in the UK compared to the previous year. And by 2023, the number had risen even further, with 1,319 Indians seeking asylum in the UK, many of them Canada-bound transit passengers.
So Canada, under Justin Trudeau's disastrous open border policies, has now become the source of a predominantly Indian-led migrant surge, drawing the ire of our two most important allies. Now, before we get into the show, be sure to drop a like on this video, help us out by subscribing to the True North YouTube channel, and the comment question for the episode is this: how should Canada address the surge in southward illegal migrant crossings? Let me know your answer in the comments below, and let's get into it. Well, according to U.S. Border Patrol officers, the majority of people who enter the United States illegally from Canada are involved in human smuggling operations like this.
And Eric says most of the people who come are involved in smuggling. This video shows attempted human smuggling in New York last year, stopped by Border Patrol.
The numbers last year in the Swanton sector alone, that's New York, Vermont, and New Hampshire, that area of the United States saw an 800% increase in border crossings from the year prior. Back in February, I had the chance to speak with Tom Homan, the former acting director of U.S. Immigrations, Customs, and Enforcement under Donald Trump, and I asked him about this issue exactly.
After 9/11, GAO did a study, and they said that a terrorist crossing the northern border is 10 times more likely than one crossing the southern border. And the number of people off the terrorist watch list crossing the northern border last year almost double the southern, but we never talk about it. Crossings in the northern border up 400 to 600%, depending on what sector you look at. I grew up near Alex Bay, again in Aquay, Kingston area, and their numbers are sky high. So, and the problem is with the Canadian border, we got very few Border Patrol agents up there, and half of them have been assigned to the southern border, which means there's very little patrol on the northern border also. It's a big national security vulnerability.
But the situation on Canada's west coast is just as bad with human smuggling. There were 42,913 encounters in the 2023 U.S. fiscal year, up from 12,345 2 years earlier. In the first half of the current fiscal year, there have been 27,483 encounters. Only 166 people were actually apprehended by U.S. Border Patrol agents in 2021. That number rose to 494 in 2022. In 2023, that number rose again to 1,662. And by May of this year, the number of arrests was already past 1,800. And Matthew Murphy, an assistant special agent with Homeland Security, told CBC News in May of this year that Indians were the #1 group seen trying to cross the border illicitly. Border data shows 7,056 encounters with Indian nationals at the BC-Washington border in the first half of the current U.S. fiscal year. But the latest data, the numbers from June of this year, show that the situation with Indian migrants entering the United States illegally through Canada has reached a tipping point. Over 5,000 Indians were apprehended at the U.S. border after illegally trying to enter the United States on foot. Here is how the English-language Indian press have reported on the latest figures.
According to Customs and Border Protection, a record high 5,000 undocumented Indians entered the United States from Canada on foot in June alone. For the first time ever, a higher number of Indian immigrants have entered the United States via the Canadian border than the Mexican one. Washington has alerted Ottawa as concerns mount over the Trudeau government's visa policies.
Stretching nearly 9,000 kilometers, which is more than twice as long as the US-Mexico border, this vast route has seen an unprecedented surge in undocumented Indian immigrants crossing into the United States. In June 2024, the situation reached a tipping point. That month alone, a record 5,152 undocumented Indians crossed from Canada into the US on foot. In 2023, a record 96,917 Indians were apprehended unlawfully crossing from Canada into the US between October 2022 and September 2023.
Furthermore, we now know that Indians with Canadian visas are attempting to just claim asylum in the UK and abandon their trips to Canada in transit. And according to Immigration News Canada, asylum claims by Indians at Canadian airports has increased by 500%. Meanwhile, the numbers are even crazier for Bangladesh asylum claims and Nigerian asylum claims, increasing over 1,200% and 700% respectively. And by June of this year, the number of Indians claiming asylum in Canada has already more than doubled the previous year's number, which was itself a record. So what happens now for Canada if we don't do anything about this? Well, we already know the domestic situation in Canada when it comes to mass immigration. But if Canada can't get this situation under control, and transnational criminal organizations and human smugglers continue to operate out of Canada by smuggling people into the United States, well, this is going to have an impact on Canada. The United States, especially if Donald Trump is elected as president, is almost certainly going to do something about this situation. And it's not going to be good for Canadians or the Canadian economy. So this is a real situation, and one that I hope the Canadian government is taking seriously. All right, everyone, that's going to do it for us today on the show. Thank you so much for tuning in. My name is Harrison Faulkner, and this is Ratio.